Hey guys, how are you doing? I hope you're very well. I just wanted to make a video about something that I think we all ought to be aware of, and that's got to do with how we are being weakened and manipulated on this planet, and this has been done for centuries. And we need to know a few things about how our minds work and how things work energetically and psycho-emotionally. So the thing that I wanted to talk about is how we are all being manipulated through fear. Fear is one of the most powerful methods to control human beings, to manipulate our actions or our non-action. So as we know, we've been experiencing quite a lot of fear due to what we hear on the news about what's going on with this virus, etc. And what we need to keep in mind is that fear, first of all, it causes us to go into a survival mode. It also makes us move into flight or fight situation where adrenaline and cortisol are released into our blood, and prolonged, it's not necessarily a bad thing if the fear is not sustained. However, when the fear is sustained on a daily basis, the cortisol and adrenaline become very toxic. They have a negative effect on our health, lowering our immune system, increasing our insulin levels in our body, affecting our metabolism, disrupting our hormonal balance in our body, leading to weight gain and tiredness. Because ultimately, as you keep on tapping into your adrenaline, you're going to get into adrenal deficit sooner or later. Excuse me. So when this happens over a prolonged period of time, I'm talking about several weeks very likely, this will lead into the degenerative conditions in our body, inflammatory issues in our body, in our intestines, in our guts, in our joints, in our connective tissue. And this can aggravate a lot of people's health problems, like arthritis. But what fear does as well, it causes people to become very protective. It causes them to move into the survival mode where people start to close off and become very defensive. And sometimes to a degree where people do not think straight anymore. They basically flush their cognitive capacity to think critically out down the toilet. So this is a very big issue because in today's times, as we are being pumped with a lot of fear, which also carries a certain type of frequency energetically, and that also has an effect on our DNA, on our cellular function, our immune system, and even our interaction with other people, of course. So when the fear happens on a daily basis for prolonged periods of time, and people move into the survival mechanism mode, what happens is people start to shut down their critical thinking, and they stop thinking intelligently, and they stop questioning the information most of the time. And continuously focusing on the fear and worry that something's going to happen absolutely will drop the immune system, making people more susceptible to becoming sick and infected with viruses, bacteria, and different types of pathogens, which are just opportunistic. When the immune system is not working well, you can say goodbye. The mask is not gonna really save anybody whose immune system is compromised, unless you want to wear a spacesuit. That is, maybe then, and you got, I don't know. I mean, this is obviously, I'm trying to emphasize how falling into extremes is counterproductive to our health, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, whichever way you want to look at it, energetically. And fear has it lowers our frequency, our vibration. And I always like to go back to the story of the white and black wolf. And so, as you know, there's a Native American story about white and black wolf that were fighting, and a kid asked his grandfather which one of the wolves will win, and the grandfather said it's the one that you feed. So obviously, if we feed fear, and that's going to persist. If we feed love, and courage, and wisdom, that's what's going to persist. So it all depends on our focus and our attention. I'm not saying that avoidance of fear is necessarily good. Like I said, fear can be used at the right time, also constructively. As I always say, face the fear, feel the fear, and move through it, or do it anyways, as some people may say. So many times the fear just holds us back because we are afraid of, punishment or judgment or rejection of someone else or even ourselves. So fear can be quite crippling, but yet we can become friends with it as well. We can use it constructively as it's trying to protect us. Usually fear is an inner mechanism that is trying to protect us from some kind of harm. And we can say to it, we can acknowledge and say, thank you so much for protecting me and being there for me and guiding me and trying to keep me safe. But I'm choosing to move through life with love and wisdom and courage. And I still appreciate you being there, but I am upgrading myself to another level of functioning and existence. So this is very important because in today's times we have so much fear, and people are stopping to think critically about everything that's happening and questioning information about pretty much everything, from the masks to this issue of the current virus and so forth, and even vaccines and so forth, right? And what's really happening on this planet. We have to keep our minds open. I mean, if we want to stay intelligent and question all information, whether we agree with it or not right away. I think that some people try to use ignorance as a way to deal with fear, as a way to, suppress the fear and act intelligently. Because there's nothing intelligent, I think we would all agree, about in suppressing our fear, I would say, because it's still there anyways. We can only transform it through courage, by facing it, and there's nothing intelligent about, not questioning information. I mean, just choosing sides without knowing anything about certain topics is simply equivalent to talking about ice cream and never having it, before. So this is really critical, in my opinion, because I see a lot of people, especially older generation of people, who are so closed-minded because they think they already know everything, even though they don't. And I'm not saying young people are any better or whatever. It's not about targeting any particular group, but I noticed this as a pattern, that older people tend to think they know everything, and they don't. They actually don't know. As a matter of fact, I think we would all agree that we all can learn more, know more, improve, and there's always a room for improvement and learning. So this is very important because in today's world, where some people, I would say, they choose to deal with fear through ignorance and arrogance, pretending like, yeah, I know everything, and in fact they don't. They're not even experts in the particular field. For example, things like vaccines, for example, right? I mean, some people think they know everything about vaccines and they don't. And they don't even bother looking into it because they think there is nothing wrong about it. And yet they don't, because of their arrogance and ignorance, they choose not to inquire, not to educate themselves, not to learn, not to look past, not to inquire and even examine what it is that they know or they don't. Because what if what we know is inaccurate? What if what we know is outdated? What if what we know is not the case anymore? I mean, isn't that the case? We always learn more, we always discover more scientifically and so forth. Anyways, so this is something that I find is a big issue. And energetically, when fear manifests in the body, it lowers our vibratory rate. It affects our DNA. And when the cortisol is released into the bloodstream very often, it will speed up the aging process. And it does overwhelm the liver as well, making us more prone to other forms of emotions, which are all emotions are pretty much controlled by the liver, according to the Oriental forms of medicine, like Chinese medicine, for example. So, and suppressing emotions creates stagnation in the body. You've got to excuse me for the noise. I am obviously driving on the road, but I would ask you, my friend, whoever you are, please consider, transforming the fear, keeping your mind and your heart open to know, to question all information and educate oneself. I think our world really depends on that, because when people are not inquiring and I know people, for example, who are not willing to educate themselves, who are very stubborn and very resistant to learning and growing, because it somehow makes them feel like, oh yeah, they're no longer this grown-up adult who's supposed to know everything, or whatever else is going on in their low self-esteem, in my opinion, minds. People don't question information, and because of that, they sometimes cause harm to their families and their children and so forth, by subjecting their children and their families to things that they're not aware of, just because they believe something is good or right, even though they don't know anything about it. So we need to consider this, in my opinion, because if the majority of people consent to masks and vaccines and so forth, the rest of us who don't want those sort of things, and we all have the right to choose what we want. We all should have the right to choose whether we want this way of treatment or another, right? shouldn't be that something should be mandated for everybody just because majority of people think that way. And it turns out that the majority of people in general tend to be incorrect, as times show. So we all have the right of choice, and we all have the freedom of choice according to our preference, and anyways, that's one thing I wanted to mention about fear. So let's do our best to focus on embracing the fear within ourselves and doing our best to send love out there to the world, transforming the fear in the world, and acting from a place of courage and love and wisdom. So all the best to you, and have a great day. Take care. And as I should ask, because I see people sometimes don't, give me a thumbs up if you like this material, or thumbs down if you didn't. I prefer a thumbs up though, obviously. And comment, please. I honestly really appreciate comments. I'd like to engage in some sort of dialogue so we can have conversations about these topics, as we all should. Have a nice day and be well.